There is an ancient fear that every one of us carries, the fear of being watched, not in the daylight, but in the darkness, when we are most alone and most vulnerable. Just the sound of footsteps behind you, the sense of unseen eyes peering through your window, or a shadow flickering at the edge of the forest, is enough to make your heart tighten and your breath grow heavy. Tonight, I will tell you 4 terrifying true stories of people stalked by strangers in the dark. Stories that will make you glance over your shoulder with every step you take at night and wonder, is someone following your every move? Be ready. And remember, sometimes danger doesn't hide far away. It stands right behind you. Story 1. The Midnight Follower. I still remember that night vividly, a cold autumn night back when I was a university student. I had finished a late study group, close to 11 p.m., and rushed to the bus stop to catch the last ride back to the dorms. The campus, always bustling during the day, turned unsettlingly silent. After 10, the long hallways cloaked in darkness, flickering street lamps, the wind hissing through dry trees. I got off at the stop near my dorm. The walk to my room was only about 10 minutes, but it led down a narrow path littered with fallen leaves, flanked by old, silent buildings. I clutched my bag tightly as I walked, just wanting to get home as quickly as possible. But halfway there, I heard the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was just the echo of my own. I quickened my pace, and the footsteps behind me quickened too. I stopped, holding my breath to listen. The silence was so thick I could hear my heartbeat, but the footsteps stopped as well. A chill crept over me, the unmistakable feeling that someone was hiding in the darkness, only a few meters away. I decided to test it, taking a detour down a narrow alley that looped past the library. Few people used that way at this hour, and if someone really was following, they would reveal themselves. I hurried through the alley, dim yellow lights flickering against stained brick walls. Within seconds, the footsteps returned, louder this time, heavier. I no longer doubted someone was trailing me. Panicked, I pulled out my phone and pretended to call a friend, hoping to scare him off. But then the screen went black, battery dead, without warning. In that same moment, I saw the shadow of a tall, thin figure cast across the bricks behind me under the light. I bolted, heart hammering, running as fast as I could. Nearing the dorm, I glanced up at my window, relief flooding me when I saw the light was still on. If I could just get inside, I'd be safe. My hands shook as I fumbled the key, finally forcing the door shut behind me. I slid to the floor, gasping, trying to calm down. But when I pulled back the curtain to check outside, my blood froze. In the courtyard below, he was standing there staring straight up at my window, motionless, silent, just a shadowy figure in the night. Terrified, I crawled back into the corner of the room. My roommate arrived just then, found me trembling, and immediately called security. When they rushed outside to check, the courtyard was empty. He was gone. The next day, security showed me the surveillance footage. Sure enough, a strange man had followed me all the way from the bus stop to the dorms. He stood beneath my window for several minutes before vanishing into the darkness. The police couldn't identify him. His face was always tilted down, hidden in the shadows. They only advised me to avoid walking home late alone and to stay vigilant. Years have passed since then, and I no longer study at that university. But every time I hear footsteps behind me on a deserted road, I think back to that night. And sometimes, I still wonder, what did he want if I hadn't made it inside in time? Would I still be here to tell this story? Story 2. The Parking Lot Stranger. I used to think the most dangerous places were deserted roads or lonely forests. But that night, I realized even a familiar parking lot could turn into a nightmare. I worked for a small company, and because of a rushed project, I had to stay at the office until nearly midnight. When I finally stepped out of the building, the vast parking lot was nearly empty, with only a few scattered cars. Dim neon lights cast a cold glow across the wet pavement after a light rain. The silence was so complete that every step of my shoes echoed unnaturally loud. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. I only wanted to get to my car quickly and drive home. But then, as I walked past a row of cars, I heard footsteps. Clear, steady footsteps moving in rhythm with mine. I glanced back. Far at the end of the lot was a tall man in a dark coat, walking in the same direction. At first, I felt relieved, assuming he was just another late worker like me. But something was wrong. He wasn't heading toward any car. He wasn't searching for keys or checking his phone. He was simply walking exactly where I walked, keeping a distance of a few dozen feet. A chill ran down my spine. I tightened my grip on my car keys, holding them like a makeshift weapon, and quickened my pace. The man's footsteps quickened too. In that moment, I knew with certainty he was following me. My pulse raced as I finally spotted my car. I unlocked it from a distance, eyes darting back. He was closer now, no longer keeping his distance. As I yanked open the door and slid into the driver's seat, he broke into a run. Heart pounding, I slammed the door and hit the lock button. A split second later, he grabbed the handle, jerking it violently. The metallic click rattled my chest like thunder. I started the engine and floored the accelerator. The car shot forward, leaving behind the image of the man frozen under the yellow light, watching me until I disappeared. I trembled the entire drive home. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next day, I reported the incident to the security team at work. They reviewed the cameras, and what they showed made my blood run cold. The man had been in the parking lot for nearly an hour, wandering between rows of cars, never touching a single one. He was simply waiting until I arrived. The police were called, but they couldn't identify him. His face was always lowered, hidden in the shadows. All they could do was warn me to be extremely cautious and never walk to the parking lot alone at night again. I stayed at that company for another year before moving elsewhere. But every time I passed through an empty parking lot with yellow light spilling across the pavement, I remember the moment that stranger's hand yanked at my car door. A simple memory, but enough to remind me that I may never truly be safe, even in the places that seem most familiar. Story 3. The Man Outside the Window. I never thought that my own window, the thin barrier between safety and the outside world, would become the greatest source of terror in my life. After a breakup, I rented a small ground floor apartment, hoping for a fresh start. The neighborhood was quiet, the rent affordable, and I felt I could rebuild my life there. But only a few weeks after moving in, I started noticing strange things. At first, it was just faint tapping on the glass at midnight. I assumed it was kids in the neighborhood playing pranks, but the knocks grew more frequent, always at the same hour, around 2 a.m. I tried to ignore it, burying my head under the covers, until one night, I couldn't anymore. When the tapping came for the third time that night, I gathered all my courage and slowly pulled back the curtain. My heart froze instantly. Outside, a man was standing motionless, his face pale under the streetlight, and what terrified me most was his eyes. He was staring straight at me, lips curling into a thin smile, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. I screamed, bolted out of the room, and called the police. By the time they arrived, the man was gone. They searched around the house but found only footprints pressed deep into the damp grass, leading directly up to my bedroom window. They told me not to worry, that it was probably just a drifter. But deep down, I knew he knew I lived alone, and he would be back. And he did. The following nights, there were no knocks. Instead, there was the unmistakable feeling of someone standing there. I never dared pull the curtain back again, but I knew he was out there. Sometimes I caught a shadow reflected in the glass, or the crunch of slow footsteps over gravel. One night, I decided to leave every light in the house on and stay awake until morning. Around 3 a.m., I heard a scraping sound against the window. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept forward, hands trembling. When I lifted the curtain just an inch, my eyes locked with his. He was pressed against the glass, so close I could see the fog of his breath misting the pane. I stumbled back, my heart nearly stopping. This time, the police arrived too late. He had vanished again, as if he'd never been there. They suggested it might be my imagination, the stress of work and living alone, but the footprints in the grass couldn't be denied. I installed security cameras after that, and only a few nights later, my worst fear was confirmed. The footage was blurry, but clear enough to show him standing outside my window. He didn't move for nearly an hour, his head tilted to the side, his gaze fixed on the room. I moved out immediately after, but sometimes, in the quiet nights of my new home, I still feel it that someone is standing outside, watching through the glass, and I dread the day I pull back the curtain to see him again, the thin smile, the empty eyes, and the silence, heavy enough to crush me. Story 4, The Stalker in the Woods. That summer, 3 close friends and I decided to go camping in a forest, about a 2-hour drive from the city. We wanted to escape the hectic pace of life, to find some peace in nature, just a campfire, the sound of insects, and a sky full of stars. The forest was known for its long hiking trails and a clearing often used for pitching tents. We arrived late in the afternoon, set up camp, lit a fire, and prepared our food. Everything felt perfect until night fell. Amid the rustling leaves and the distant calls of owls, I heard something else, a heavy, slow rhythm, like footsteps. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but then my friend Chris frowned and asked, "Do you guys hear that?" We all froze, listening. And then we heard it too. The crunch of dry leaves being stepped on, circling somewhere just beyond the glow of the fire. Someone was walking around our camp. We called out, asking if it was another hiker. No response, only the night wind cutting through, chilling our spines. Chris grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the trees. For a brief second, the beam lit up a tall, thin figure standing still, just a few dozen meters away. When the light swung back, he was gone. None of us slept that night. The footsteps lingered, sometimes distant, sometimes close. Each time we tried to close our eyes, there came the snap of a twig, as if someone wanted us to know we weren't alone. Around 3 a.m., a whistle cut through the silence. Short, sharp, and bone-chilling. Panicked, we doused the fire and huddled inside the tent, praying he would leave. But the whistling continued this time, right outside the thin fabric walls. I could hear his breathing, slow and deliberate, just inches away. No one dared move. We held our breath until daylight finally came. When we stepped outside, what we saw froze us in place, dozens of footprints all around the tent, circling again and again, as if he had been wandering around us the entire night. We packed up as fast as we could and left the forest. On the trail back, I turned for one last look, and my chest tightened far off between the trees. The man was standing, silent, watching us until he vanished into the woods. We never went back to that forest. And even now, I still wonder if we had fallen asleep that night. Would he have stayed outside the tent or stepped inside? The 4 stories you've just heard are not only personal experiences, but chilling warnings that the darkness out there has never truly been safe. You can lock your doors, draw the curtains, or pitch a tent deep in the forest. But if someone is determined to follow you, the feeling of being watched in the night can become an unending nightmare. The scariest part isn't their presence. It's the fact that you never know what they'll do next. If these stories sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell, because there are many more true horror stories I'll be sharing. And who knows, one day, your own experience might become the story whispered about in the dark.